Testing Cycle 43, Category 77. Metaphysical matter transcribed into previous specimens has failed. All other creatures that inhabit cybernetic or machine-like traits have fallen to its touch. Thus, a specimen of pure flesh and little neurocapacity is required for this to be a success. I have options available to me. I found little reason to use them before, but perhaps for this very delicate operation, they can finally be of use. Subject has been chosen for transfusion. The magpie had swiped it off the edge and pier borders, which I find strange. The location is far off from what I assume to be its natural habitat. Doesn't matter. The specimen is secured and in suspended animation. Bioscanners indicate an incomplete growth. Brain capacity is not fully developed, and possibly even permanently stunted. I find this infuriating. This indicates potential brain damage that has been done to the subject prior to its delivery. This may actually explain why it was found lost in the pier in the first place. While this does mean the transfusion between data will be much safer, as the creature will be too ignorant to recognize the change. This also means that I will have to be extremely specific when describing its mission. Anyway, carry on with the experiment. I waste time fluttering over this. Transfusion process has begun. Extraction of physical form will have to commence. The size and weight of the specimen makes this difficult. The process may take longer. I find it actually easier to transfuse larger and heavier subjects than it is smaller ones. Why this occurs, I could not say. The specimen is expressing the usual symptoms of transfusion: loud noises, excess water loss, mass reduction, and physical instability in the form of phantom fractures appearing on the space around it. As scheduled, the physical form of the subject begins to shed apart. I recorded 12 minutes, 26 seconds, until the physical body had been successfully peeled away. Now begins the assimilation of the metaphysical node. The specimen remained in an unconscious state for the lasting stimulation. I had connected it through life support during this period. Recently, the specimen had awoken. As I expected, the discovered brain damage and underdeveloped mind keeps the creature unaware of what it truly is, and therefore cannot cause any current damage as long as it remains ignorant of this. However, as I expected, the specimen is reassembling its basic functions, such as learning how to walk again, and its lack of organs and orifices preventing any need for consumption or waste disposal. Food, in a natural sense, is useless. Consumption, in a manner, is still required, in the form of condensed information. The best way I have been able to truly feed the symbiote, as I've started calling it, is either by letting it consume stolen information nodes that are useless to me, or filling a pearl with garbage information, and letting it feast on that. However, I cannot afford to let it feed here for much longer, as I have bigger use for these pearls than it does. I will have to maintain a close eye on this creature. I am not undoubtful that it will find a way to do something stupid. Education in its abilities and mission will commence in time. The specimen has reached a stable enough point of self-control for the education to begin. The chamber I have selected for the specimen to inhabit contains an appropriate amount of simulations that it may have to endure. Testing number 1, lacking inertia in gymnastics. Platforms and gymnastic arenas have been designed for it to become adequate for any acrobatic scenario it may find itself in. The specimen has lost the physical sense of inertia, as it no longer applies. Tripping from extended heights or being flung into a wall has little effect, which will be necessary for its long travels. All while these tests went on, there was only a 50 to 65% succession range. The primary source of this is due to the specimen's flawed motor functions. Whatever cranial injury it suffered before transfusion had carried on to this form. This is something I will have to eventually fix. Were I not so intimidated by the potential hazard of it leaking into my systems, nevertheless it is understanding of these terms, I think. Testing number 2. Electromagnetic location. A much simpler task to explain to the specimen. All light fixtures in the chamber will be temporarily disabled. In addition, the specimen will be blindfolded, as my natural lights cannot be disabled anymore. The task was for the symbiote to find where in the room I was located, This test was to specify the exact perfection of the specimen's ability to detect electromagnetic pulses through a sort of sensory magnet in its body. Overall, the symbiote had located me within expected time. The ability is indeed functional. Now to expand this exercise by introducing danger to the equation. I had funneled several scavenging creatures into the chamber, each with a small computer chip located in the back of their head. Many of my experiments had chips such as these inserted, either for tracking or a failsafe detonation if things got too risky. Being able to detect the static fuzz of their computer chips, the symbiote would be able to locate their positions quite easily. Thus they did. The symbiote made no attempt to attack, and fled to me instead. An acceptable decision, for the time, but not something they should expect to get away with in the future. Testing number 3. Symbiotic cyber possession. I dreaded this task since the beginning. I knew from the start that this would be the most aggravating exercise to convey to the specimen. The idea of symbiotic cyber possession abilities can be described as such. Due to the introduction of the metaphysical node, the specimen is designed to be able to forcefully integrate themselves into technology and control it by their own means. This would stimulate a sort of possession towards its host. During this practice, I had made a damning discovery. At first thought, caused me great dismay, but over-evaluation may actually work to my benefit. The symbiote can barely control its own bodily movements, let alone another that it possesses. So while it transfuses into another machine or creature's cybernetic origin, it detonates quite aggressively. My hypothesis suggests the reason for such is that the symbiote becomes so neurologically overstimulated that it erupts in a sort of epileptic brain aneurysm. When this happens, the symbiote rematerializes. No critical damage is done to the specimen, aside from muscle spasms, from what I can estimate to be the aftermath of a seizure. This proves useful. The original task was to transport the symbiote far off into the eastern sides and infect Iterator towers. However, where I want to make this death quick and as painless as possible, this is a more acceptable option. For the symbiote is what I can describe as living malicious hardware. Once injected into machinery, its being alone begins to infect and corrode. Given how overstimulated the symbiote becomes when interjecting into even just a simple vulture, I cannot imagine how exotic the destruction of, say... Well, no, I can imagine it, of course. Nevertheless, it is what must be coded. Moons have gone by, testing and simulating this task over and over. The day is almost here. The magpie is currently away from my systems at this time. I will not send the specimen out until its return. I have little faith that the symbiote would make it very far with its own flaws that it has. This gives me time to correct the error in its brain. I need to be as careful as possible not to have it assimilate with me. I keep it in suspended animation when it sleeps. If I didn't, the symbiote would gently phase through its containment during its unconscious state, and seemingly float wherever. It seems to only obey the laws of gravity and physics when it's conscious, possibly because it still thinks it's an animal. I cannot afford to get too comfortable with this creature. The only reason I have to think it won't destroy me is that I am unsure if it even wants to. But it has been given numerous opportunities to kill me, yet it hasn't. I suppose I shouldn't be too upset. As I said before, the more overwhelmed, the more violent the explosion, so my systems would surely cause a catastrophic apocalypse if it were to infect me. This is why I must die last. And if I am to go first, who will save the rest? Certainly not the others. They know not what I know or what I've seen. Neither does this little thing. It knows nothing. It doesn't know what it truly is. I hope the day that it learns, this world will be long since dead, and I have done my duty.